Hello, and welcome to our presentation of the East-West Harmony Garden. We at Brewer Total Landscaping are delighted to be selected to submit a proposal for the redevelopment of the Royal Roads front lawn. Our proposal is for an East-West Harmony Garden to emphasize harmony between nature and culture and celebrate the Pacific Rim Eastern and Western cultures. The current front lawn stretches from Hatley Castle to Esquimalt Lagoon and is an underutilized monoculture and parking lot. We propose creating a Chinese scholars garden on one half of the lawn and to work with the Indigenous communities to design an appropriate sister space for the other half. Our proposal will fulfill Royal Road University's requirements to respect site history, incorporate the landscape and current architecture, provide a space for scholarly reflection and recharge, promote respect and dialogue on cultural differences, respect the adjacent migratory bird sanctuary, delight visitors, and be a celebrated feature of Victoria. The design will follow the guidelines set out by the paper by Greg Missingham and Alex Selinchuk called 10 Steps for Designing Gardens on Classical Chinese Scholar Garden Principles, starting with global rules. Global rules are the features that are common among these types of gardens. Chinese scholars' gardens are devices for cueing reflection. The design is directed by nature. They are asymmetrical, symbolism is manifest in all elements, change is expected, selected views are borrowed from outside the garden, scenes and details are framed for the viewer like a landscape painting, and the garden unfolds like a hand scroll painting. Yin-yang principles emphasize contrast in all elements. On to site design. Our proposal for Royal Roads is derived from visits to the location. Here's an aerial view of the university. The site has a history as Indigenous land, a family estate, military college, and now university. Hatley Castle is a designated historic site. As we are on Vancouver Island, this garden will be inspired by Chinese scholars' gardens with similar intentions as an authentic garden, but with adjustments for the location and needs of this public space, such as safety and accessibility. Before we can start work, we will need to move the parking lot. A survey will be conducted and the overflow parking at the top, which is up here, will become the main parking space. The lawn has 4 terraces. It slopes from Hatley Castle down to Esquimalt Lagoon, about 700 meters in distance. The castle is to the north, the lagoon is to the south. The north-south access is not perfect, but it is auspicious and consistent with Chinese gardens. Here's the site division. The space will be divided into east and west halves by walls and waters and connected by walkways and bridges. The Chinese garden will occupy the western half of the lawn, and it will be adjacent to existing gardens already on site. The Indigenous design will be on the east side, and it will be adjacent to the mature native local forest, creek, ravine, and trail. The blue heron house is down here at the bottom, and the desires of the Indigenous community will direct the design. The bridges will symbolize harmony, goodwill, and openness between the 2 cultures. Down the center line will be water representing the Pacific Ocean, so the 2 cultures on either side. The terraces are currently named 1, 2, 3, and 4 and will be throughout this presentation. The uppermost terrace, number 1, will be dense with vegetation and rock. The second terrace will be the main site of new architecture, a pond and courtyards. The third will blossom and the fourth will feature a large infinity pond. The first and second terraces will most closely resemble Chinese garden design. Mountains and waters are key features of the Chinese garden. Terrace 1 will have rock in the form of an alpine zone, a forest zone, and an understory zone. There'll also be stepping stones and pebbled natural pathways. Terrace 2 will have patterned pebbled paths, a symbolic Mount Penglay, and smaller study rocks, scholars' study rocks. Terrace 3 will have stone paths and bridges, stone walls and seating, and Terrace 4 will have ocean edge boulders or pond edge boulders and climbing and seating used. These boulders are used for that. These 6 pictures are half from the Chinese tradition and half from Vancouver Island. Traditionally, Lake Tay is the source of the rock used in Chinese scholars' gardens. The rock is eroded limestone that is described as craggy, cloud-like, or melted wax. Can you pick out the 3 that are those? The solid and void of these rocks are yin-yang. They are placed vertically as sculptural elements that appear to defy gravity. We will break with this tradition and use rock sourced from Vancouver Island. We have eroded rocks along our coast, and we have limestone deposits in the form of karst formations. We'll identify rocks with the help of the Indigenous community and consider ecological sensitivity. The Vancouver Island rocks pictured here are these 3, and there's enough similarity that we believe that we can bring the feeling and the deep reflection that comes with the Lake Tay rocks to our garden using these more sustainably sourced rocks. We also believe that there will be deeper reflection from people on Vancouver Island from these familiar and potentially deeply spiritual rocks. Rock will also be found in rustic, cobblestone, and decorative patterned paths, bridges, walls, and stones for seating and writing. Water will enter as well, channeled through in Terrace 1 here. There will be a waterfall. The stream will continue mainly through Terrace 1 and then into the central, which we are considering the Pacific Stream. It will also flow into Terrace 2 into the koi pond and then out again, entering the Pacific Stream to the infinity pool. From here, it will slowly spill over the wall and enter Esquimalt Lagoon. Terrace 4 will have the infinity pool, which will be a large, still water. And when you're standing on Terrace 4 looking out, the water will be continuous with the ocean beyond, extending the view. Here we have a waterfall, streams, koi pond, our Pacific Stream, and our infinity pond in examples. Now for the details. First, walls. There will be a great wall around Terrace 1 and 2. Terrace 3 will have a short stone wall surrounding with ample seating. Terrace 4 will have the retaining wall for the pond overflow. The Great Wall is a nod both to the Great Wall of China and to the battlements of Hadley Castle. The wall will have lookouts and provide additional viewing of the garden from above and the landscape outside the garden, including the castle and the ocean. There'll be several ramps to aid accessibility. From the castle side, there's a ramp here that is level. It starts at the ground here, and while the ground slopes down, the level ramp will let you reach the upper wall. Traveling here, you can ascend or descend on this spiral ramp that'll be an architectural feature, and descend through this traditional angled ramp. We'll also have a ramp between terrace 2 and 3 that will be inspired by the Imperial Palace. So here's the level ramp where the ground drops away, causing the incline. There'll also be an archway underneath to allow passage underneath the wall. This is a traditional sloping angled ramp and an example of a curved ramp. And here we have the ramp to the Imperial Palace. There will be several doors. The main entrance is on the south side into the Grand Ceremony Hall. As mentioned before, it will resemble the Imperial Palace. Additional entrances will be into Terrace 2, into the study hall space, and into the gardens through Terrace 1 up here. Several other, this is the archway underneath the ramp here. There'll be both moon gates and arches. A gourd-shaped door will be found but not in the Great Wall itself. The wall will have several windows to frame key features outside the wall. For example, this window here, you'll be able to look out and see the castle. Examples of windows and gates. Gorgeous. The wall will also provide on the ground floor cover on these walkways. These other ones here will be connected by buildings on the main floor, so you'll be able to walk in shelter throughout this area. Examples of some very beautiful walkways from Chinese gardens. In Terrace 1, or Hall 1, we propose a journey through several scenes, concealed and then revealed. The space is roughly divided into thirds, north-south, and then again east-west, 9 quadrants. The movement from north to south will be like descending a mountain. When you enter through the gate here, you'll come upon some large existing deciduous trees, but mainly rock. It'll be like a rock garden, very rustic up here. Then continuing on to rock grottos, which a person will be able to enter like a shallow cave. There will also be that window that was mentioned here behind the rocks, so it's a surprise when you get there. Continuing on, this area up here is our showstopper rock. It is large and somebody could sit there for hours just meditating on this wonderful rock that we've found on Vancouver Island. The path continues down. You can exit here, or you can continue down through the pines. These are taller trees, so you cannot see beyond when you're within them. And then emerge at a single large dawn redwood. They're not as big as the giant redwoods, but this is a very important species as it was once thought to be extinct. It is an evergreen, but it turns orange in the fall and it loses its needles. From there, we have a series of maple trees and some smaller bushes as well. The maples will be beautiful in the fall like the dawn redwood. A bridge will take us over the stream. This is a rustic style bridge. And in the area will be stream vegetation, bringing us to the willows and then onto the mossy part of the garden. So it's really gone from rugged to very soft. The connection back up is along the waterfall. The waterfall can be viewed from either side, the moss willow side or the rock garden side. And there'll be stepping stones that will take one down to the waterfall. Moving on to Terrace 2, this is the hall where we find both architecture and outdoor spaces. Having traveled through Terrace 1, you can enter Terrace 2 through a gate here and either go to enter this courtyard to the tea room, the library, or down along this covered walkway. These are the first flowers that you'll encounter. The first one, terrace, is all treed in rock. And you'll be able to see the lotus pond from both the tea room and the libraries, which will have patios along balustrated walkways. Both the library and the tea room will look out on the lotus pond, and you can, from the library, travel onto a path that takes you out onto the water to a gazebo, and then you can view the mythical Mount Penglay in symbolic form here, home of the immortals, and then travel on another walkway back to the land. All of these buildings will appear to float on the water. The path takes you through ginkgo trees and more maples, as well as banana leaf, which will pick up the sound of the rain. Moving along into this corner here, we have bamboo and more rocks, and there's pathways that end in dead ends, and then there's paths that are continuous throughout the garden. So you can choose. And at this end, there is peony garden. The peonies and the lotus will provide beautiful scent in the spring. There'll be other plantings such as chrysanthemums that will be blooming in the summer. The largest and most public space is the ceremony hall. There's a grand entrance to the south, and the hall will be site of cultural events, including music and performance. It will also host celebrations such as Chinese New Year and private weddings. The peony garden and the lotus flowers will be beautiful sites for photos, as will many of places in the garden. The south facing in front of the hall will allow views of the trees of Terrace 3 and also the ponds and ocean views of Terrace 4. The ceremony hall, library, and over here the studios are multi-storied spaces. As this is a university, the library and the studios will provide spaces for study and reflection, as well as group work. These are mature students that come for 2 to 3 weeks a year, and so they have different needs than a traditional university. There's a lot of group work. Here we have some examples of scenes that could be seen in Terrace 2, and we have examples of architecture in the traditional Chinese style. So the buildings have upturned corners on the roof. They're hip and gable structure roofs, and they have doggone interlocking wooden brackets to displace the weight of the heavy tile roofs to the outer columns. The Grand Ceremony Hall is likely to look more like these buildings, where our smaller buildings like the tea room will have more of this space and the gazebos, this style. Terrace 3 is a more informal space, and as mentioned, there will be stone pathways and a wall with seating. The main feature will be the blossoming trees and bushes. A beautiful stone bridge will connect this area across the Pacific Stream to our sister site on the Indigenous side. Terrace 4 was the infinity pond level, and will have a zigzag wooden bridge to a shared central gazebo. A ting-styled structure over here will host quiet classes, particularly beautiful at sunrise and sunset, when the sky and the water either glows and lit up by light or is shrouded in fog. There's a bamboo grove and also the bouldering rocks down at the pond edge. So Here we have an example of the smaller stone walls, steps down, seats among built into the wall, a bridge crossing over the water, and boulder-style rocks at the edge of the water and our zigzag bridge. The blossoming plum is going to be the main feature and just a delight of Terrace 3. So there's many plants mentioned already. They're all symbolic and they're chosen for their physical properties and their symbolism and their contrast with other features of the garden. Particular examples of symbolism are the pine, bamboo, and plum, which are the three friends of winter, pine being endurance and longevity, bamboo being flexibility and upright morals in first Taoism and second Confucianism, and plum being happiness and renewal. There's other symbolic plants like the lotus, which is a symbol of the Buddha and purity and wisdom. The peony is a flower of wealth and happiness. The willow is resilient. It goes everything, every plant has a very specific and symbolic meaning. Examples of pictures of these plants. And finally, last but not least, very important, is poetry. As I am not an expert on Chinese poetry and classical literature, it is best that this very important element be properly thought through by an expert. And so for this purpose, we have designed into the studio spaces a permanent space for the poet in residence. Likewise, for visual arts for the interior buildings, such as poetry, painting, and calligraphy, will be added over time after deep reflection on the space. We'll no longer call it Terrace 1, 2, and 3, and Wooden Bridge this or Stone Bridge that, but they'll have beautiful names like the Pond of Intense Harmony, for example. Here's a reference. Here is the citation for the design paper, and all of the images are sourced. Thank you for the opportunity to both learn about Chinese garden design and create this space for you. It has already become a space for reflection, if only in the mind of its creator.